Comprehensive other memory. Pretty challenge of firing or card we welcome. Held in format. Comprehensive maritime. Driving power for it to timeline.
I thank the representative of the United States for his statement announcing the law to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you. I just want to say very quickly that we strongly support this resolution. The Security Council Resolution 1540 has been a critical part of the multilateral non-proliferation architecture since adoption in 2004. The committee and its group of experts have reviewed more than 500 national implementation reports from 135 countries. We see it as vital that this work continues, and the UK therefore applauds Mexico's efforts as chair to secure and
Thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his statement. There are no more names described on the list. Accordance with Law 35 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure made by the representatives of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Syrian Arab Republic, and Turkey. Accordance with the rules of the Council. I thank the public. I'd like to thank, welcome, colleagues, necessary to establish constructive dialogue as fostering drafting body. We hope that the work primarily encourage the on constitution.
पागल है खाली
Myself.
Its sessions should be held regularly, much like meetings of the drafting committee. Regularly postponing meetings in order to fine-tune methodology for holding them clearly won't help progress be made. Efforts on the political track now are particularly needed. all the more so given the situation in a series of regions of Syria not controlled by Damascus remained tense. A clear confirmation of the dangerous destabilization of this was a serious terrorist attack on the Sana prison in attack. As a result of this operation to neutralize ISIL fighters and to rid the region of them with the use of aircraft and armored vehicles, led to dozens of casualties amongst Syrian civilians, and more than 45,000 people needed to leave their homes. This reaffirms the need for an uncompromising fight against terrorism in Syria. And we'd note also that currently practically all IDPs have been able to return home. However, the situation with children in detention, more than 700 of them indeed, continues to be cause of concern. Colleagues, separately I'd like to note the efforts of the Russian President's Commissioner for Children. On the 24th of February, another 14 children aged between 3 and 15 years old were repatriated from Syria to Russia. 5 of them were in shelters in Damascus, and another 9 were evacuated from the territory of refugee camps in the area beyond the Euphrates. The work to trace Russian children in refugee camps and repatriate them will continue. It is being done by a decree from the President of Russia from 2017. Since December 2018, from the zone of armed conflicts in the Middle East to the territory of Russia, 364 children were repatriated. Currently, documents have been prepared for another 128 children. The humanitarian situation in Syria remains serious too. 14 million Syrians need assistance. Socioeconomic challenges in the context of suffocating unilateral sanctions are multiplying and worsening. Progress in implementing Resolution 2585, which should boost the comprehensive humanitarian assistance to Syria, remains limited. In half a year, only 2 domestic convoys have been able to reach Idlib, and there is no access to the area of Turkish operations. As well, funding projects for early recovery continues to be politicized by Western donors. The resolution was renewed for another 6 months after the publication of the Secretary-General's special report. In the upcoming period, we trust that efforts will be mobilized on the part of the UN and other members of the international community to ensure that this document is implemented in full and in good faith. From implementing this approach and achieving substantial results, this will hinge on how we discuss this and what decision we make in July this year. Attempts to cherry pick preferred elements like cross-border elements from the document and ignoring projects for early recovery and also work to on cross-line humanitarian access is unacceptable, and it does not allow us to address humanitarian and social economic questions in Syria. I resume my function as President of the Council, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am taking for the first time before the Council this month. I would like at the outset to congratulate you on your presidency of the Council for February and on your able leadership. We express our appreciation to the positions of your country aiming at upholding the principles of international law and the UN Charter. Mr. President, we have listened to the briefing of Ms. Misoya, in which she highlighted some of the aspects of the sufferings of the Syrian people, the suffering that is still going on inside the countries and outside it as a result of the wrong policies and the grave violations of international law and the UN Charter, including the imposition of unilateral coercive measures which are being imposed by the governments of some Western countries that have given precedence to their agendas and interests over the lives and welfare of the Syrians and the stability and security of Syria and the region. Ladies and gentlemen, at a time when the Syrian government is deploying all its efforts to improve the humanitarian situation and to provide the basic needs and services, and to rebuild what terrorism has destroyed, and to take Syria back to the track of sustainable development while guaranteeing the safe, voluntary, and dignified return of the Syrian refugees to their lives and normal livelihoods. Our efforts are being met with major obstacles that are limiting the achievement of the results we seek. And I would like, in this regard, to highlight some of these obstacles. First, until recently, Syria has been self sufficient in many agricultural products, while today, Syria finds itself compelled to import huge amounts of these same products. For instance, Syria's yearly production of wheat before the war was estimated at 2.5 million tons. Today, Syria has to import 1.5 million tons of wheat per year to provide bread to Syrians. This is due to the fact that the US forces, which are illegally present in the northeast of Syria, and the separatist militias backed by the US have taken control of the Syrian wheat production in that area and are looting. Second, the major scarcity of irrigation water for agricultural purposes, which is due to the fact that the Turkish regime is violating the bilateral agreements regulating the Euphrates water. Besides the fact that they are using water as a weapon against the civilians and depriving more than 1 million Syrian citizens from access to drinking water. 3. Before the crisis, Syria used to produce 9,500 megawatts of electrical power. Today, its production does not exceed 2,600 megawatts. This deficit in electricity generation is due to the fact that the US occupation forces are looting our oil and gas pipelines. Besides the crimes committed by terrorist organizations and the aggressions launched by the illegitimate international coalition and which have greatly damaged the power generation plants and the transmission and distribution networks, leading to the decommissioning of 50% of our network. And this has deprived the Syrians from heating in this winter season. 4. The health and medical services sector and the pharmaceutical industries, which were pioneering before the war and which had achieved self-sufficiency for most of the medicine, besides exporting our products to tens of countries, today this important sector is experiencing the repercussions of the embargo. And the repercussions have exacerbated with the COVID-19 pandemic, depriving the Syrians of the right to access the necessary health care and medication. 5. The unilateral coercive measures imposed by the United States and the European Union illegitimately on the Syrian people have affected the different sectors, including the banking sector, energy sector, communication sector, and the land, air, and maritime transportation. The consequences have been exacerbated in the recent years, leading to furthering the humanitarian sufferings of the Syrians and to a regression in the sustainable development indicators in Syria after we had achieved a notable progress before 2011 with an economic growth of 9%. The consequences of these illegitimate measures imposed on Syria have also affected the work of the UN organizations and other international organizations operating in Syria. Whereas the cost of the food basket provided by the WFP has increased fivefold, and its nutritional value has dropped to less than the half. Exchange rates have also increased, as well as inflation, while the purchasing power collapsed. And it is worth noting that some Western countries, which had deliberately harmed the Syrian economy, are complaining from the fluctuations in the exchange rate of our national currency. Mr. President, 8 months after the Security Council adopted Resolution 2585, and during all that period, Syria has been greatly cooperative and has provided a lot of support to the United Nations to implement that resolution, especially with regard to accessing humanitarian or especially with regards to cross-line access and early recovery projects. We have waited too long, but our frustration is as great as our suffering. We have reached the end of the month of February, and the resolution's mandate only has 4 months still. Unfortunately, we haven't witnessed any progress in the implementation of the early recovery projects. This is due to the lack of the political will in some Western countries to implement the substance of the resolution that was unanimously adopted. We haven't seen any enhancement of the cross-line work either. While 16 convoys, including 1,261 trucks, were sent across the borders in December and January alone, in the past 8 months, the UN was only able to send 2 convoys with 28 trucks across the lines to the northwestern region. This is due to the fact that the Turkish regime and the terrorist organization it supports have been hindering the access of these humanitarian assistance and their distribution. It is clear now that the Turkish government, which is the sponsor and protector of the Nusra Front and other terrorist organizations controlling Idlib and its neighborhood, are hindering the implementation of the working mechanism across those lines in order to protect their own interests and what they are achieving from this cross-line mechanism. Mr. President, with regards to the financial aspect, Special Envoy Mr. Pedersen undertook last week talks in Damascus with the foreign minister and with the co-chair of the Constitutional Committee. The Special Envoy took note of the important achievements that are being done with regards to reconciliation and compromises. And we are still going on with these reconciliations in the different Syrian areas, including Daraa, Deir ez-Zor, Hasaka, and the liberated areas in Al-Raqqa. This has allowed a great number of Syrians to go back to their normal livelihoods. It was also noted that amnesty decrees were issued by His Excellency the President of the Republic, and thousands of Syrians benefited from these decrees, and these are extremely important measures that should be highlighted instead of being ignored. The Syrian Arab Republic reiterates its commitment to a political settlement based on a Syrian owned and led process, while totally committing to the Syrian sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity. We also reiterate the importance of implementing the substance of the reference paper, organizing the works of the Constitutional Committee, and not going beyond its provisions under any pretext. Syria emphasizes that the work of the Constitutional Committee is an exclusive right for the Syrians, and no foreign parties have the right to intervene or obstruct in its work or impose timelines or pre-conclusions. We look forward to the seventh round of the Constitutional Committee on the 21st of March. To conclude, Mr. President, Syria reiterates the importance of a realistic approach to improve the humanitarian situation in Syria and to restore peace and stability. By changing the current political approach and undertaking rational talks based principally on achieving the interest of the Syrian people and leading to ending the Turkish, American, and Israeli foreign occupation of the Syrian territories, and ending their continuous hostilities and aggressions against the Syrian sovereignty, and ending their sponsoring of terrorist organizations and separatist militias. It also requires closing all the illegitimate camps on the Syrian territories and deporting the foreign terrorists and their families from Syria and sending them back to their mother countries. It also requires ending the dangerous attempts at recycling terrorists and the immediate and unconditional lifting of the embargo imposed by the US and Europe on Syria, and supporting the efforts of the Syrian state to achieve sustainable development, to improve the humanitarian situation, and to provide the basic services. Thank you, Mr. President.
Благодарю представителя Сирии.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement, and then I'll give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I thank Special Envoy Pedersen and Assistant Secretary General Misuya for their briefings. As we have just heard, the humanitarian situation in Syria is growing worse day by day. 14.6 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance now. This indicates a shocking increase of 1.2 million from last year. Harsh winter circumstances have brought the living conditions of displaced persons, especially in Idlib, to the brink of destitution. The international community has to do more to ensure that humanitarian aid continues in an increasing manner and without interruption. There is simply no alternative to the United Nations cross-border humanitarian operation in addressing these acute needs. This is a fact, and empty promises will not change it. For our part, Turkey will also continue to facilitate cross-line convoys. However, it is hypocritical, if not malicious, to call for more cross-line access to the local populations and at the same time conduct attacks against these very same people. I wish to ask a very clear question. What is the use of cross-line operations if the regime and its backers will bomb civilians and intentionally target water and fuel facilities? The regime and its backers must stop killing civilians so that the cross-line mechanism can deliver humanitarian aid. It must also be underlined that humanitarian aid has become a part of regime's shameless corruption. The regime diverts international humanitarian aid channeled to the country for its own purposes. This is unacceptable. The Syrian people's last resort is the generosity of international donors. Yet even that, the regime takes away. It is shameful. We expect the UN to answer our earlier queries on this issue. We trust that the donors are closely monitoring the situation. Due attention should be paid to this issue in the subsequent reporting period. Finally, water and electricity problems caused by the regime and PKK-YPG in El Bab and Resulayn Tel Abyad region should not be ignored. We cannot allow the propaganda of these groups to find their way into the reports. Mr. President, delays in the political process prolong the suffering of the Syrian people. We support and appreciate the efforts by Special Envoy Pedersen, which we hope will lead to the success of the Constitutional Committee. However, the regime has been unwilling to seriously engage in UN-led peace talks in Geneva. It is clear that they intend to stall the process until they eliminate the opposition on the ground. The next round of the Constitutional Committee must produce tangible results. For this to happen, the regime and the speakers must exert pressure on the regime. Otherwise, the regime will continue to abuse this platform and further stall the political process. Mr. President, Turkey will consistently support efforts to continue the escalation on the ground in order to create an environment in which the political solution will last. We will also continue to support the UN's initiatives taking a political solution. It is critical that these consultations align with the international community's acquis on the Syrian conflict, as well as the letter and spirit of Resolution 2254. Finally, we wish to make a call to those countries that intend to normalize their relations with the regime. Do not confuse normalization with legitimizing a criminal regime. We need to normalize the lives of millions of Syrians who have been suffering in the hands of the regime for more than a decade. We need to normalize the implementation of the universal human rights that the people of Syria deserves to enjoy. We need to normalize Syria to become a democratic, secular, prosperous, and secure country. Mr. President, Daesh remains a common threat to humanity, complete eradication of which requires unified, coordinated strategies. Genuine intelligence sharing is essential to fight against Daesh. The repatriation of foreign terrorist fighters is another necessary step in this fight. Thirdly, we must address the root causes of this conflict. Daesh and other terrorist organizations found fertile ground in Syria because the regime not only failed to protect its own people, but began attacking them. Until a political solution is found to the crisis in Syria, terrorist organizations like Daesh will continue to recruit people. Mr. President, some actors in the region have misguidedly tied their hopes of eradicating Daesh to another terrorist organization, PKK-YPG. Make no mistake, PKK-YPG's goal is not to end the threat of Daesh in Syria, but rather to maintain the support it receives from certain members of the international community by keeping Daesh on the agenda. The real fight against Daesh can only happen with the support of legitimate actors. Those who support PKK-YPG must immediately break their ties with this illegitimate structure. Mr. President, I also wish to remind that we are yet to receive a response to our request for a UN investigation into the attack on Al-Shifa Hospital on 12 June 2021. Mr. President, for 10 years, the Syrian people have fled the horrors of an unjust war the regime has perpetrated against its people. Yet what most of these women, children, elderly people, and disabled have found is purgatory. It is a cruel world we live in that such a treacherous journey led them to a tent that is no match for snow, no match for the cruelties of the regime, Daesh, PKK-YPG, no match for barrel bombs, for airstrikes, a tent that cannot allow for social distancing in the COVID-19 era, a damaged tent even less so. Enough is enough. Mr. President, I have to repeat that the hallucinatory statement made by the criminal Syrian regime representative that I do not consider him as my legitimate counterpart, his presence here is an affront to the millions of Syrians who suffered countless crimes at the hands of the regime, and therefore I will not honor his delusional accusations with a response. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Turkey for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. President, I would like to thank Mr. Pedersen and Ms. Misuya for their briefings. Syrian people continue to face numerous challenges, and meeting them necessitates hard work in a multitude of sectors. Nothing is more important or urgent than ending unilateral coercive measures that have harmed the Syrian people to the point where they have been deprived of their basic human rights, including the right to medicine, healthcare, food, water, electricity, and communications. These illegal measures negatively impact the delivery of life-saving humanitarian supplies where they are needed most. Given the dire humanitarian situation in Syria, where major portions of civilian infrastructure have been destroyed. The Security Council must work diligently to ensure that Resolution 2585 is fully implemented in a balanced and effective manner, especially in terms of early recovery projects and the lifting of unilateral sanctions. We fully support the UN Secretary General's call for further expanding early recovery operations in Syria and agree that such initiatives are crucial to the sustained success of the humanitarian response in the country. It is particularly disheartening that, due to the lack of collaboration on the part of other parties, progress on cross-line operations in areas not controlled by the government has been far less than envisaged. We condemn the robbery of Syrian people's natural resources in areas controlled by foreign forces, particularly oil and agricultural products, and recognize the government's legitimate right to combat such criminal acts. More importantly, Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity continue to be significantly violated by the unlawful presence of foreign forces, including those of the United States. We strongly condemn the Israeli regime's repeated violations of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The recent Israeli attacks in Syria, which targeted civilians and civilian infrastructures, constitute flagrant violations of international humanitarian law. We call on the Security Council to hold this regime accountable for such acts of aggression and its malign activities, as well as its open threats to use force against other regional countries that jeopardize regional peace and security. Mr. President, the Astana format will continue its efforts to bring this crisis to an end and alleviate the sufferings of the Syrian people. And in support of these efforts, foreign ministers of the Astana guarantors will meet on 10th March. We commend Mr. Pedersen's recent visit to Damascus and support his ongoing efforts to hold the Constitutional Committee's next meeting, which is scheduled for 21st March. We underscore once more that the committee must work in strict conformity with its terms of reference and rules of procedure without any outside influence or pressure and any artificial deadlines. This must be a truly Syrian-led and Syrian-owned endeavor, with the UN's role limited to facilitating that process. The free movement of terrorist groups, including ISIS, in Syria's territory where foreign forces are illegally present, as well as their transfer to other countries, endanger regional and international security. The fight against terrorism cannot be used as an excuse to undermine Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The illegal presence of foreign forces in parts of Syria, which has provided favorable conditions for terrorist activities in Syria, must end immediately. Iran continues to support Syria's efforts to tackle terrorist threats and preserve its unity and territorial integrity. I thank you, Mr.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his statement and now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic to make a further statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. To be honest, I did not ask for the floor to respond to the claims and lies that were put forward by the representative of the Turkish regime. I asked for the floor to draw the attention of the members to his professed claim to his concern over the operation of terrorists in Syria. The head of ISIL that was assassinated by the US forces, al-Qurashi. The place where he was assassinated was a few meters away from the location of Turkish occupying forces in the northwest, or in the northeast rather, in Idlib. Al-Qurashi used to operate right next to the location of the Turkish forces. The head of Al-Nusra Front, Al-Jawlani, was able and is able to move around freely in Idlib under the protection of the Turkish forces that are operating illegally in that area. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement, and I now give the representative of Turkey to make a further.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. My PR has just said what was needed to be said. We're not going to respond to this shameless individual.
Thank you. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
Ne mogu ni da verujem da sam mislila da sve moram sama i trudila sam se da sve radim sama.
Trudim se da budem što više uz njega, trudim se da budem što više uz Aleksandru, znači da je pomažem u bilo kom smislu.
Velika dobrobit za njihov odnos. Ona je više fokusirana na igru sa detetom, ima strpljenja, zadovoljnija je sobom.
Ako brinemo o roditeljima, brinemo i o deci. Kroz ovaj program ja roditeljima nudim konkretne alate, da pronađu sopstvene snage, da se na njih oslone, da pronađu osobe od poverenja i prijatelje, onda naravno i u zajednici i da nekako prevaziđu sve te situacije koje mogu da budu potencijalno stresne.
Niko ti ne kaže da u stvari sa drugim detetom to je totalno nešto drugačije. Da opet možeš da učiš kako da postaneš mama.
Nije imala vreme ni da se odmori, ni da se posveti sebi, tako da sam sa njom prošla takođe dnevne aktivnosti.
Njoj se posebno svidelo to što smo zajedno, na primer, pravile rasporede, pošto je bio u vidu slika, da crta, da seče papir. Tu smo provele vreme zajedno na jedan kreativan način, a plus je meni omogućilo kad se zasiti da ja imam malo slobodnog vremena.
Mislim da se najčešće naša igra svodi na praćenje. Ona ide, ja pratim. Da dijete stvori svoje osjećaje za dobro, loše, opasno.
Fokus na roditelje je jedan novi fokus u našem poslu. Mislim da je jako važno s obzirom da su roditelji prvi i najvažniji učitelji za ceo život svoje deci, da budu osnaženi i dobiju podršku.
Dan mi počinje tako što vidim njen osmeh i ja se raspoložim, promenimo joj pelene i onda kreće žurka.
Nekad to nisu igračke, nekad je to kašika koju koristim u domaćinstvu. Kad slažem veš, ona obavezno bude oko mene.
Savez koji su oni zajednički stvorili treba da bude primer svima, da mama treba da ima vreme za sebe, tata treba da ima vreme za sebe i da imaju zajedničko vreme sa detetom.
Zajedničkim snagama prolazimo kroz sve i želimo da je zajedno učimo svemu.
Sometimes we all have feelings.
سال یعنی آرزوی صد جوان میهنم، مایه است بر آتش در عمق چشمان و تنم. سال یعنی گر نباشد لحظه ای هم نیستم، در نبودش سالهای وافر گیریستم. سال بحر روح و جسم خستم چون گوهر است، از هزاران صد هزاران آرزویم برتر است. نیست سال در کشورم من خستم، خستم دل خستم افسردم. خستم از آتش توپ و تفنگ و انتحار، از قتل و دزدی و از ارتکاب انفجار. کیست آن کس تا صدای خسته من بشنود، بشنود گر نشنود پس تا ابد هم نشنود. هاشمی برخیز و بر آوردنش هر دم به جنگ، تا نسوزد میهنت در آتش توپ و تفنگ، تا نسوزد میهنت در آتش توپ و تفنگ.
Let's turn trash into cash. My name is Nzambi Mate. I'm the founder of Jijenge Makers Limited, and we convert plastic waste into building products. Plastic waste is not just a Kenya problem, but it's a worldwide problem. And here in Nairobi, we generate about 500 metric tons of plastic waste every single day, and only a fraction of that is recycled. We decided, what more can we do instead of just sitting in the sidelines and complaining? Essentially, companies have to pay to dispose the waste. So we solve their problem. The waste essentially comes for free. This is the plastic waste we get from factories. With this, we mix with sand, as the plastic is like the binder. We have 3 machines. The extruder does the mixing of plastic waste with sand at very high temperatures, and then the press compresses it. Plastic is fibrous in nature, and so therefore the brick ends up having a stronger compression strength. Does that look like waste? It's almost half the weight. So therefore, during transportation and installation, it's faster in terms of cost implication. We right now have a capacity of producing 1,000 to 1,500 bricks a day. So far, we have recycled 20 metric tons, and we are looking to push that value to 50 by the end of next financial year. Winning the Young Champions of the Earth award is a huge motivation booster for us as a team. It's been a long 3-year journey, and so this was like someone saying, I see what you're doing and I appreciate that. And with this platform, we're looking to see how we can get on board partners to scale this solution, not just in Kenya, but all over Africa, just to start. And in addition to that, be able to impact and motivate other people and other youths to do similar things in different places. So right now we are just making paving blocks, but we now want to make actual building blocks. As I like saying, you have to be true to your why. Why are you doing this? What is the motivation behind it? For me, I was just tired of being in the sidelines of seeing plastic. I ideally jumped in off a cliff without even a parachute. I was building it as I was falling down. But isn't that how great things are done? So act for nature.
د ژوند شیبو کې مولوي را بس خوندونه نشته، غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته، غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته. تا راته اور په بڼ بل کړی دی خزان د کړلو، تا راته اور په بنډبل کړی دی خزان دې کړلو چې نر نختر سوری دې غوندې ګلونه نشته غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته دا دې اغېزې په هېواد کې د بدمرغه جګړې دا دې اغېزې په هېواد کې د بدمرغه جګړې څوک معلولین دي د چا پښې د چا لاسونه نشته غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته له خپل فرهنګه نه خبره ښوونځي موراندې له خپل فرهنګه نه خبره ښوونځي موراندې به مو خوړلي د کورونو دیوالونه نشته غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته زموږ غوښتنه په آرامه ژوند کتاب قلم دی زموږ غوښتنه په آرامه ژوند کتاب قلم دی زموږ په زړونو کې نور جهل ته ځایونه نشته غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته غمونه ډېر دي خدایه ولې اخترونه نشته
In this fast-moving pandemic, no one is safe unless everyone is safe. But as a growing number of COVID-19 vaccines advance through clinical trials and become available, wealthy countries have reportedly laid claim to over half the doses that come on market by the end of 2021. Some have reserved enough doses to vaccinate their populations multiple times over. So how will we make sure that the light at the end of the tunnel shines for all, that poor countries don't get left out? UNICEF and its partners have a plan. It's called COVAX. COVAX is the global initiative to ensure that the COVID-19 vaccines reach those in greatest need, whoever they are and wherever they live. And UNICEF is leading on the procurement and delivery of the COVID-19 vaccines for 82 low and lower middle income countries. We're also supporting the procurement for over 90 upper middle income and high income nations. Together, these represent more than 4/5 of the world's population. The initial 2 billion doses are intended to protect frontline healthcare workers, social workers, high-risk and vulnerable people. As the largest single vaccine buyer for children in the world, UNICEF has unique and long-standing expertise in procurement and logistics. In 2019, we delivered over 2 billion vaccine doses, which reached almost half the world's children. We're bringing the full weight of our experience in working with people and building trust in vaccines. At UNICEF, we are committed to serving the most disadvantaged, and we will work tirelessly in the months to come to make sure every country has a fair shot. Because where you live or the amount of money you have in your pocket shouldn't determine whether you can get these life-saving vaccines.
My name is Melinda Sada. I'm coming from Jakova. I'm an executive director of Medica Jakova. When I was a child, I saw that the women has no right, equal right, like the men's in our society. I used to advocate to the families of my friends to give my friends the freedom of movement and the freedom of being free and living their life as they want. Working in civil society is much more than working, it's a mission. Medica Jakova with the work cover all Kosovo. We support Albanians, drag community. We have Serbian women, Bosnian, Turkish women that we provide psychosocial support, ecological support, and legal support, and also economic empowerment. To increase their capacities, we orientate them to do the business, open any startup, or to produce the products that they needed in order to generate some money for their self and for their families.
Për shkak të stigmës, mundohemi që grupi i grove që angazhohen në sektorin ekonomik të jetë i ndryshuar. Prandaj ne gjithmonë mundohemi që grupi i grove të jetë qoftë që kanë përjetuar dhuna të ndryshme, qoftë persona të rrjedhësuar, qoftë grupeve të minoriteteve, në mënyrë që të bëhet një grup i ndryshuar të mos i
फ्यूजन कार है मैंने इनको बहुत नाम सुना है ये बस में सारी लग्जरी कार्स होती हैं
अब नहीं शूट कर सकते
We know that the stigma is so high here, and due to the stigma, the people are not able to speak out about what happened to them and also to apply for the pension.
Pra, kam kthyer. Jemi mbledh çdo 2 javë. Jemi shku. Falenderoj mije. Dhe ma ka ek shtresi. Ka shumë shtres madh. Nëse që jom shku në medika, jom aftësu, atëherë I kom thonë burrit, po vjen edhe ti, provoja një herë. Apova.